I didn't know what to make of the man I met along that quiet stretch of trail in the foothills outside town. He looked like someone who'd been walking for days without knowing where he was going, half lost in thought and half lost in the world itself. There was something nervous in the way he watched the trees, as if he expected them to rearrange themselves when he wasn't looking. When he finally spoke, his voice trembled in a way I have never forgotten. He said he wasn't supposed to be in this year, and that he had no idea how to get back. My name is Gary, and back in 1987, my life was quiet enough that I noticed things most people ignored. I noticed Owen first by his silence, how he seemed afraid of breaking whatever thin thread was holding him together. He told me he'd been wandering the outskirts of the forest for weeks, trying to find a place he swore had been there before. A clearing, a rise in the land, something subtle, something that had taken him out of his own year and dropped him into mine. At first, I thought he meant he was lost in the ordinary way, the way hikers sometimes misjudge a turn. But Owen kept insisting the place he needed didn't exist here, not yet. He said the ground was wrong, the path was wrong, the light even felt wrong. The more he spoke, the more I realized he wasn't confused. He was terrified. He kept saying that if he couldn't find that place again, he feared he'd never see his own life, his real life, ever again. I tried to comfort him, though I didn't understand a word of what he meant. Still, something about the way he spoke made me believe he believed it. Every afternoon after work, I walked the trails with him, looking for a place that matched his memory. He described it over and over, a slope shaped like a question mark, a tree curved as if pulled by the sky, a patch of ground with soil too pale for the season. We never found anything close. And then one night, Owen disappeared. No note, no goodbye, no sign of where he went. I've walked those trails hundreds of times since then, searching for any trace of him. But the truth is something I carry quietly. I don't think he ever found the way back. And I don't think this year was ever meant to let him go. Back then, in the summer of 1987, I didn't have many people in my life who asked anything of me. Most days were quiet. Work, home, a walk along the trail if the weather allowed. Maybe that's why Owen's presence settled into my days the way it did. He didn't demand much, just conversation, a few shared moments on the path, and the hope that I could help him find whatever strange place he had lost. He told me he trusted me because I listened. I'm still not sure I deserved that trust. He spoke about his life carefully, as if each memory could cut him if he handled it wrong. He mentioned friends he missed, places that didn't look the way he remembered, and a job he wasn't sure existed yet. Every detail he gave felt slightly out of place, like a picture hung just a little crooked. I didn't press him for explanations. The more he talked, the more I sensed how afraid he was. His fear wasn't loud or dramatic. It sat quietly in the way he paused before speaking, or how he kept glancing at the landscape as if checking whether it still matched the world he knew. I told myself I was only helping him get his bearings, the same way I might help any lost traveler. But it wasn't true. Owen had slipped into my routine with a kind of weight, a quiet gravity. I didn't understand what he was going through, but something about his presence made me feel responsible for him. And when he described the place that had brought him here, the curve of the land, the odd shape of the clearing, I started to picture it just as clearly as he did. I started to believe we would find it, but belief doesn't change the world, and some places, once lost, refuse to be found again. Hi, my name is Gary. If you're enjoying this story, I'd really appreciate it if you subscribe to the channel. Do you think Owen ever found his way back to his year? Or did this timeline keep him for good? Thanks for spending your time here with me. Now let's return to the story. I remember the first morning Owen and I agreed to search together. The air was cool, the kind that settles softly against the skin before the day warms up, and the trailhead was empty except for us. He stood a little apart from me, hands in his pockets, scanning the tree line as if comparing it to a memory he didn't entirely trust. I could tell he hadn't slept much. There was a heaviness in his posture, a quiet tension that lingered around him like a shadow. He started talking before we'd even taken a step. "It's not far," he said. At least it wasn't. His voice carried a strange mix of certainty and doubt, like someone remembering a dream that felt too real to dismiss. He described the place again, the curved rise of the ground, the way the trees bent toward each other, how light gathered strangely in the clearing. He said he'd taken a step forward and felt something like falling and lifting at the same time. And when he opened his eyes, the world didn't match the one he'd left behind. As we walked, I tried to imagine what it must be like to feel disconnected from your own time, to look around and see the same land, but shaped by a different year, a different sequence of decisions, storms, and seasons. Owen said that part frightened him more than anything else, that the world felt familiar but wrong, like a song played in the correct key but with all the notes shifted slightly. He kept pausing, touching the bark of certain trees, studying the slope of the land with an intensity that almost made me uncomfortable. He wasn't just looking for a place, he was looking for proof that he hadn't imagined the life he came from. We reached the ridge he had pointed out the day before. It wasn't steep, just a gentle rise that offered a view of the valley below. From up there, the town looked peaceful. Small houses, patches of farmland, the thin silver line of the road leading back toward home. I thought the sight might calm him, but instead he seemed more unsettled. "This wasn't here," he murmured. "Not like this." He pointed toward a cluster of buildings near the edge of town. That street didn't exist. The fields were different too, and over there, he hesitated, lowering his hand. There should have been a trailhead, a real one, maintained, worn. Not this. I didn't know what to say. From where I stood, everything looked ordinary. But the look on his face made it clear he wasn't trying to convince me of anything. He was trying to reconcile the world he saw with the world he remembered. We moved on, letting the silence settle between us. It wasn't uncomfortable. In fact, it felt necessary. Every time Owen stopped, I stopped with him. He'd turn in a slow circle, squinting slightly, as if searching for something only he could sense. I noticed he kept touching the ground with his foot, pressing lightly as if testing its firmness. He eventually explained why. "In my year," he said, "this part was softer. The soil had shifted after a flood. You could feel it under your boots." He paused, shaking his head. "But that flood hasn't happened here yet." Something in his voice made me look at him differently. Up until then, I hadn't fully allowed myself to believe his story. It felt easier to assume he was frightened, disoriented, or grieving something he couldn't talk about. But hearing the quiet conviction in his tone, this mix of memory and loss, made the edges of my doubt soften. We reached a bend in the trail where the trees thinned out. Owen slowed, stepping carefully, almost reverently. "This is close," he whispered. "I can feel it." His words weren't dramatic or performative. They were almost afraid. He walked ahead a few paces, scanning every inch of the ground. Then he stopped completely. "This isn't it," he said after a long moment. "Everything is here, but nothing matches." He turned back toward me, and for the first time since we'd met, I saw something raw in his eyes, something I didn't yet know how to name. Owen didn't move for a long time. He just stood there, staring at the ground as if hoping it would rearrange itself into something recognizable. I waited beside him, unsure whether to speak or give him space. The forest around us was quiet, just the rustle of leaves and the faint sound of wind drifting through the higher branches. It felt like the world was listening too, holding its breath with us. Eventually, Owen crouched and touched the soil with his fingertips. "It should slope here," he murmured, "just slightly. Enough that you'd feel yourself leaning without meaning to." He dragged his hand across the earth, forming a shallow line. "But this is flat. Too flat." He looked up at me, and his voice dropped even lower. "It's like the land itself hasn't become what it's supposed to be." I didn't know how to answer that. I glanced around, trying to see what he saw, trying to imagine the land in a different year, shaped by storms or floods or construction that hadn't happened yet. But to me, it was just the same forest I'd walked through since I was a boy. We started walking again, but our pace had changed. Owen wasn't rushing anymore. He wasn't scanning the woods with wide eyes. Instead, he moved carefully, almost tenderly, like someone tracing the edges of a memory they were afraid to lose. Every now and then he'd stop, inhale slowly, and then shake his head. Each time he did, it seemed to wear him down a little more. "I didn't mean to come here," he said at one point. "I wasn't exploring anything unusual. I wasn't trying to test something. It just happened." He hesitated. It was quiet, like today. And then there was a shift, a pressure, not sound, more like the moment before sound. Everything dimmed for half a heartbeat. When it brightened again, the clearing was wrong. He rubbed his palms together as if trying to warm them. I thought maybe it was a trick of the light or fatigue, but then I saw it. The tree line wasn't the same. The branches were at different angles. The trail had moved a few feet north. The air felt heavier. That's when I knew. We stopped beside a fallen log. I leaned against a tree, and he sat down at the end of the log, resting his elbows on his knees. His posture made him look smaller somehow. "Gary," he said quietly, "I've tried to accept that I'm stuck here, but every morning I wake up with this ache, like I'm waking up in someone else's life. Mine is out there somewhere, and I'm missing it one day at a time." The honesty in his voice settled into me. It was the kind of truth that didn't need proof. It just sat there, heavy and real. I didn't know whether to reassure him or ask questions, so I did neither. I simply stayed there with him, letting him speak. "It's the smallest things that break me," he continued. "The birdsong is different. The wind feels warmer. Food tastes wrong, even though it shouldn't. My body recognizes this world, but my mind doesn't. It's like everything is 1 degree off from where it should be." He paused, staring at his hands. "And the worst part? No one in my year knows where I went. I doubt anyone even knew I left. He swallowed hard. "I just vanished." Hearing him say it aloud made something shift in me. All this time I had tried to treat his situation like a puzzle, a search with clear steps and a possible solution. But now I understood. It wasn't the place he was terrified of losing. It was the life attached to it. After a while, we continued walking, though neither of us expected to find the clearing that day. The trail wove through the trees, the sunlight thinning as clouds rolled in. Owen grew quieter, his gaze drifting toward the ground more often, his footsteps slowing as if the weight of the world were dragging behind him. Eventually he stopped again, not urgently, not startled, just slowly, like a thought had settled fully in his chest. "What if I wasn't meant to come back at all?" he asked. There was nothing I could say to soften that question, so I stayed there beside him, feeling the forest darken just slightly, as if the world itself understood the gravity of his fear. We stayed in that spot longer than we meant to. The air had cooled, the forest turning dim and quiet as the clouds thickened. Owen's question, "What if I wasn't meant to come back at all?" hung between us, too heavy to move past quickly. I didn't want to answer it. I didn't even want to acknowledge it. But I could feel his fear settling into the ground beneath our feet, as if the earth itself understood the weight of what he was saying. Eventually he straightened up and brushed the dirt from his hands. "Let's keep going," he said, though his voice was soft and uncertain. "Maybe the land changes a little further in." It didn't sound like hope. It sounded like someone trying to outrun despair. We walked deeper into the trees, following a narrow path that curved around a cluster of moss-covered rocks. Owen slowed again, studying the rocks with a puzzled expression. "These should be split," he said. "Not whole. In my year, this one was cracked right down the middle. People carved initials into it decades ago." He touched the surface lightly, as if searching for marks that weren't there. "Owen," I said, "maybe the place you remember isn't exactly the same. Things change. People move trails, cut trees, shift land." He shook his head before I could finish. "Not like this. Not this much." His voice trembled. I know what I saw. There wasn't anything I could say to argue with that, not without dismissing the fear in his words. So I stayed quiet, letting him continue to search, letting him reach out and run his fingers along the stone, as if hoping the past would reveal itself beneath the surface. We moved again when the wind picked up, the branches swaying and creaking softly overhead. Owen pulled his jacket closer around himself, though the air wasn't particularly cold. He walked a little ahead of me, shoulders tense, steps uneven. I could tell he was losing confidence, not in the search, but in himself. He glanced back at me once. "You know," he said, "I used to think I had a good sense of direction. I trusted my feet, trusted my instincts. But now," he paused, letting out a slow breath, "nothing lines up anymore. It's like someone rearranged the entire world when I wasn't looking." We reached a split in the trail, a fork that didn't appear on any local map I knew. Owen froze. His eyes widened just slightly, a flicker of recognition or memory or hope. This wasn't here," he said. "Not in my year. The path curved left, not right. And this wasn't a fork. It was just a single trail." He walked toward the right-hand path, then stopped abruptly, backing away as if he'd stepped somewhere dangerous. No, this is wrong." His breathing quickened, not in panic, but in a quiet, suffocating way. like someone realizing they were further from home than they'd ever imagined. "It doesn't matter what direction I take," he whispered. "Every path leads away from where I'm supposed to be." I stepped forward, placing a hand on his shoulder, not to guide him, but to steady him. He didn't shrug it off. If anything, he leaned into the small contact, as if grounding himself for a moment. "We'll keep looking," I said. "If this place changed between years, it might take time to recognize it. Landscapes shift, trails move." "It wasn't the trail," he murmured. "It was the moment. Something folded, something let me through, and I think it was a mistake." We stood there together at the fork, listening to the wind push through the branches like a slow breath. Owen wiped a hand across his face, though he wasn't crying. He looked exhausted in a way sleep couldn't fix. "Gary," he said quietly, "I don't think I'm lost in the woods. I think I'm lost in the wrong version of the world." There was nothing I could say to that, nothing that wouldn't sound hollow or dismissive, so I stayed beside him, letting the silence answer for both of us. The forest dimmed a little more, and for the first time since meeting him, I realized how small the world could feel when the time you belonged to wasn't the one beneath your feet. Over the next few days, our routine settled into something almost familiar. I'd meet Owen near the old trail marker just after sunrise, and together we'd walk deeper into the forest, following whichever direction pulled at his memory. Some mornings he arrived with a spark of determination, convinced that the light or the season or even the temperature felt closer to whatever moment had brought him here. Other mornings he looked hollowed out, moving like a man who had run out of places to look inside himself. But no matter how he felt, he always showed up, and so did I. One morning, he arrived later than usual. His steps were slower, his breath uneven. "I didn't sleep," he said before I could even greet him. I kept thinking about the trail, how it felt under my boots. The ground was softer in my ear, like it had absorbed more rain or maybe more footsteps. Here, everything feels untouched. New. He gave a low, humorless laugh. "It's strange to feel homesick for dirt." We started walking anyway. The forest was quiet, the kind of quiet that makes every sound feel sharp and fragile. A bird call echoed somewhere distant. A branch snapped under my foot. Owen didn't seem to hear any of it. His eyes were fixed on the path ahead, searching for shapes or shadows or patterns that might connect this world to the one he remembered. After a while, he stopped at a place where the trees grew in a crooked formation, their trunks bending at odd angles. "This is close," he whispered. "Almost." He stepped forward, then back, then forward again, as if trying to align himself with something unseen. "But the spacing is wrong, and the ground should dip here." He pressed his heel into the soil, frustration tightening his shoulders. "Why isn't anything where it's supposed to be?" I leaned against a tree, watching him pace. There was something painful about the way he moved, like someone grieving a place instead of a person. "Owen," I said gently, "what if the clearing doesn't exist yet? What if whatever you walked into just hasn't happened here?" He paused. For a moment I thought he might consider it. Then he shook his head. "If that were true, I wouldn't feel it. But I do. There's a pressure in the air when we get close. A tension, like the world is holding its breath." He closed his eyes and inhaled deeply. "It's faint, but it's familiar." We continued on, pushing through brush as the trail narrowed. Sunlight filtered through the canopy in shifting bands, casting the forest floor in warm gold and cool patches of shadow. The deeper we went, the more cautious Owen became. He walked carefully, almost reverently, touching tree trunks, feeling the roughness of bark beneath his fingertips. Sometimes he would kneel to brush away leaves, checking the soil beneath. It reminded me of someone handling fragile memories, trying not to break anything important. The forest opened into a small meadow, and for a moment, both of us froze. The shape of the space was simple: a gentle rise, a patch of unmoving grass, a circle of taller trees framing the clearing. But something in Owen's posture changed. He stepped forward slowly, as if afraid the ground might vanish beneath him. "This..." He stopped. "This is almost it." His voice trembled with a mix of wonder and heartbreak. "The shape is right. The light feels familiar. But..." He turned in a slow circle. "It's missing the bend, and the slope is wrong. And that tree..." He pointed toward a tall, twisted pine. "It wasn't here, not yet." He took another step, then another, and the hope in his expression collapsed. "It's close," he said. "Close enough to hurt." I didn't know what to say. The meadow looked ordinary to me. Beautiful, yes. Quiet, yes. But ordinary. To Owen, it was something else. A shadow of the place he had lost. A reminder that the world he belonged to was just out of reach. He sat down in the grass, burying his hands in the soil. "It's here," he whispered. "Not now, but someday. I can feel it." He lifted his gaze toward me, eyes tired but steady. "This land becomes the place I knew, but not yet. Not in this year." The wind moved gently through the clearing, stirring the grass around him. And for the first time, I understood the depth of his fear. Not just of being lost, but of being too early for the life he left behind. Owen didn't rise from the grass right away. He let his hands rest in the soil as if grounding himself to a timeline he didn't quite belong to. I stood a few steps away, unsure whether to sit beside him or give him the space he seemed to need. The meadow was still, quiet in a way that felt almost suspended. Even the wind seemed to hesitate before passing through. "It's strange," he said finally, "to know that a place will matter to you long before it becomes what you remember." He closed his eyes, inhaling slowly. "I keep expecting the air to shift, for something to open." When he looked at me again, there was no frustration this time, only exhaustion. "But this year isn't ready for me." I lowered myself into the grass next to him. "Then maybe we're looking for something that doesn't exist yet." He gave a faint smile, sad, sincere. "But I exist, and I remember it. So somewhere out there is the version of this place shaped by the year I knew." He hesitated. "I don't think I crossed at random, Gary. I think something aligned, something small, like a seam in fabric tightening and loosening at just the right moment." His words drifted into the air between us, and for the first time, I didn't treat them as metaphors. They sounded too precise, too lived in. "Tell me something," I said quietly. "When you came through, when you stepped into the clearing, did anything look broken? Out of place?" He considered this. "No, it was quiet, still, but it felt full, like the world was stretching in every direction at once. And then the ground tilted. Not physically, just temporally." He let out a shaky breath. I stepped forward, and the next second, the color of the sky was different. We sat in silence again. Owen plucked a piece of grass and twisted it between his fingers. I watched him, sensing how fragile he felt, like someone trying to hold his life together with thin strands of memory. "Do you think," he said after a while, "that I'm supposed to wait? That maybe the only way back is to survive long enough for this place to become the one I knew?" His question startled me. "Owen, that could take years." He nodded slowly. "I know." He let himself fall back onto the grass, staring at the sky. "The problem is, I don't know if time moves the same way between timelines. If I wait here, maybe everything there already changed without me. Maybe the version of my life I remember doesn't even exist anymore." There was no good answer to give him. The ache in his voice told me he already knew that. Eventually, he sat up again and brushed off his hands. The determination he'd arrived with that morning had long since faded, replaced by something heavier, an acceptance he wasn't ready to name. "Let's move," he said quietly. "Sitting still makes the world feel even more wrong." We headed toward the edge of the meadow, passing through a narrow corridor of trees. Owen slowed down again, touching the bark as he walked. "These weren't this thick," he murmured. "In my year, they were younger. You could see farther through them." "That sounds normal," I said gently. "Trees grow." "Yes," he said, "but not at the same rate across timelines." Every observation he made felt like a reminder that he lived in a world where everything was both familiar and foreign, a world where even nature betrayed him. At one point he stopped and placed his hands on his hips, staring into the forest with a look I couldn't describe, somewhere between longing and defeat. "I keep hoping I'll find one thing that matches, one detail that proves I'm not imagining the life I came from." His eyes lowered, "But every step makes it feel farther away." We resumed our walk in a silence that didn't feel forced. The trail wound through shadows and sunlight, the forest shifting between cool pockets of air and warm streaks of light. Owen walked as if every shift mattered. Like each patch of ground was another question he had to answer. Near the ridge, he paused again. "I'm scared," he said simply. I didn't ask of what. Some fears don't need explanations. They sit in the spaces between words. understood without being spoken. We stood together, looking out over the valley. The world stretched below us in calm indifference. For a moment I wished I could see it through his eyes, see whatever he had lost, whatever he still hoped to find. But all I could do was stand beside him, knowing that the land he longed for was close enough to imagine, but too far to reach. We continued along the ridge until the trees opened just enough for the landscape to appear in fragments, patches of forest, slices of distant hills, a glimmer of river in the valley below. Owen paused, as if each piece of scenery were a clue. I could see him trying to place it, rearrange it in his mind, shift it into the shape he remembered. But every time he looked long enough, disappointment darkened his expression. "This bend in the ridge," he said after a moment. "It should overlook the trailhead. In my year there was a wooden post with a faded sign. Nothing fancy, just enough to mark the start of the path." He scanned the ground, then the slope. "There's no sign here, and the angle of the valley is off. It's a few degrees wrong." He stepped back, frustration flickering over his face. "Why does this place feel like it remembers something I haven't seen yet?" I didn't know what that meant, not fully. But I understood the feeling of standing somewhere that didn't match the memories you expected. I'd felt it after my father died, walking into rooms where his absence felt louder than his presence ever had. Owen crouched, running his fingers over the dirt. "Look at this," he said. "The path is too narrow. In my year, people used it often. It was worn down. The ground had more give, like footsteps had shaped it." His voice softened. "No one's walked this version of the trail yet." He stood again, brushing his hands off. "It's strange, Gary. I keep thinking maybe the world is trying to help me remember. But then it changes, slightly, subtly, and I lose the thread." We descended the ridge slowly, following a narrow path lined with ferns. The air felt cooler here, shaded by dense branches overhead. Owen moved more carefully now, as if walking through places where his life could intersect or diverge at any moment. As we reached a flatter stretch of trail, Owen stopped abruptly. "Wait," he whispered. This feels right." He walked ahead a few paces, then knelt beside a patch of dirt. "In my year there were footprints here, old ones, like someone had walked through mud and left marks that never fully faded." He touched the ground gently. "Here it's untouched. No imprint, no memory." I knelt beside him. The soil was dry and firm, nothing remarkable about it. But the way he looked at it, like someone reading a letter no one else could see, told me it mattered. "Owen," I said quietly, "how did you know you were in another year? What was the moment you realized?" He didn't answer immediately. He stood, walked a few steps, then turned back toward me, his eyes distant. "It wasn't one moment," he said. "It was dozens. Small things. A store sign spelled differently. A street that looked too new. A friend's house missing from the block." He paused, but the worst was the sky. The color was wrong one evening, just slightly. It shouldn't have bothered me as much as it did, but I knew. I felt it deep down. Even the light wasn't the light I grew up with. His honesty weighed on me. I tried to imagine noticing the sky was wrong, not dramatically, not obviously, but subtly, like the hue of a childhood memory fading before you realize it's gone. He continued walking, slower now. Ever since that day, I haven't felt aligned. Like I'm walking next to my own life, but not inside it. We reached a small clearing surrounded by tall pines. The air here felt different, still, almost heavy. Owen exhaled sharply, as if recognizing something that wasn't fully present. "This is close," he whispered. "Too close." He moved toward the center of the clearing, turning in a slow circle. "In my year, the ground dipped here, just a few inches, enough that you'd notice when you stepped into it." He stomped lightly, listening to the firmness beneath his feet. "Here it's solid. Not ready, not formed." He stopped moving, shoulders slumping. "Gary, I don't think I stumbled into another time. I think I fell into one that wasn't finished yet. A world still becoming." The idea chilled me in a way I couldn't explain. A timeline incomplete. A place half built by time. A version of the world waiting for the years to catch up. Owen looked toward the trees, his expression dimming. "And the more I look," he said, "the more I realize I might never find the version that belonged to me." We stood there in the quiet clearing, the sky darkening above us, the world holding its breath again, just as Owen said it had right before everything changed. And for the first time since meeting him, I wondered whether he was searching for a place that no longer existed, or one that simply refused to let him back in. Over the next week, Owen and I fell into a rhythm that neither of us acknowledged aloud. He would come to my door just after dawn, eyes tired, clothes carrying the faint scent of pine and cold air, and we'd head into the forest together before the rest of town had fully woken. I didn't question why he refused to sleep in, or why he always looked like he'd spent the night wrestling with a world that didn't fit him. Some questions don't have gentle answers. Each day we walked farther than the one before. It wasn't that Owen believed the clearing had moved. It was that he believed time might be folding differently in certain pockets of the land. He would stop suddenly, lift his head slightly and say, "Something feels off here," or "The light shouldn't fall like this." I never sensed anything myself, but I had learned that the worst thing I could do was dismiss it. For Owen, these moments weren't guesses. They were fragments of a map only he could see. One morning, the fog lingered longer than usual, settling low across the forest floor. Owen walked ahead of me, moving quietly, like someone trying not to disturb the air. When he paused, the fog swirled gently around his legs, blurring the edges of his silhouette. "This feels familiar," he said softly. I stepped beside him. The clearing we stood in wasn't remarkable, just a thin circle of flattened grass and a few leaning trees, but the expression on his face made it feel heavier, charged. "In my year," he continued, "this spot had an odd smell, like rain hitting warm dirt, and the air hummed. Not loud enough for sound, but enough to feel in your bones. Do you feel it now?" I asked. He hesitated. "Almost. Like the world is trying to remember something." We stayed there for a while, breathing in the mist. The quiet thickened around us, and for a moment even I felt a shift, small, barely perceptible, like the forest exhaled in a different rhythm than before. But it was fleeting. Owen closed his eyes, waiting for something more, and when nothing happened, his shoulders fell. "It's not ready," he whispered, "or I'm not." We moved on, the fog thinning behind us. As the morning brightened, we reached the edges of a ravine neither of us had explored before. Owen traced the jagged line of rock with his eyes, then stepped back as if startled. "This wasn't here," he murmured. "Not like this. The slope is too sharp and the tree line was farther back. That could be erosion," I offered gently. "Storms, landslides." "Maybe," he said, "but this doesn't look altered. It looks new." He crouched at the edge, fingertips hovering over the soil without touching it. When I crossed over, the ground trembled, not visibly, just enough that I felt it in my legs. He looked up at me. It was like stepping onto a surface someone had only just decided existed. His words unsettled me, not because they sounded impossible, but because they didn't sound like guesses. They sounded like memories. We walked along the ravine in silence until Owen stopped again, this time with a sharp inhale. "Gary," he said quietly, "look." At first I didn't see it. The forest floor was littered with fallen leaves and pine needles, branches scattered by wind. But then I noticed a faint indentation in the soil. Not a footprint exactly, more like a shallow depression, curved strangely, as though the ground had sagged under weight that wasn't fully physical. Owen knelt beside it, hands shaking slightly. "This is where it happened," he whispered. "Or close to it." I crouched beside him. "Are you sure?" He nodded slowly. "I don't expect you to see what I see, but this shape, the way the earth dips, it's almost right. Almost." He swallowed. "But the trees aren't the same age, and the slope is too even. It's like finding a memory with the important parts missing." I looked at the depression again. It could have been anything. An animal's resting place, soil settling after rain. But the way Owen stared at it made me feel like I was looking at something sacred, something tied to a moment the world couldn't quite recreate. He closed his eyes. "I'm so close," he murmured, "close enough that it hurts." The wind brushed through the branches overhead, scattering leaves across the ground. Owen didn't move. I felt myself holding still too, as if motion might break whatever fragile connection he felt to the place. After a long moment, he opened his eyes and whispered, "Gary, what if the version of this place I belong to isn't coming back?" The question hung in the air like a weight settling on both of us. And for the first time, I didn't try to reassure him, because I wasn't sure I could. We didn't speak as we left the ravine. Owen followed a narrow path along the ridge, barely noticing the branches that brushed against his sleeves or the stones shifting beneath his boots. I stayed close behind him, watching the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands curled into fists and relaxed again, as if holding tightly to something he couldn't bear to lose. When we reached a small overlook, Owen stopped abruptly. The view stretched out beneath us, the treetops rippling in the breeze, the distant hills soft with morning haze, the faint outline of the town resting quietly in the valley. He leaned forward slightly, not enough to be dangerous, but enough that I sensed he was searching the horizon for something only he remembered. "In my year," he said softly, "there was a fire out there. It happened when I was a kid. Burned a stretch of forest down to ash. The trees never grew back the same way." He pointed toward a dense patch of green. "But here, it never happened." He let his arm fall slowly. "I didn't realize how much I relied on those scars to navigate," he continued. "I used them as markers, proof that a moment existed, proof that my life followed a path I could trace." He exhaled, long and shaky. "Here, the world looks too clean, like someone rewrote a chapter and left out all the hard parts." I stepped beside him, studying the landscape. Everything looked untouched, whole, peaceful. But for Owen, that peace was a reminder of absence, a missing history only he remembered. "Owen," I said quietly, "if the years don't match, maybe the world isn't broken. Maybe you're just early." He smiled faintly, but there was no warmth in it. "That's what scares me. If I'm early, I can't go back. And if I'm late, then everything I loved might be gone already." He sank down onto a large rock, elbows resting on his knees, hands clasped loosely. I joined him, and for a long stretch of time we just sat there, listening to the distant hum of wind sweeping through the hills. At some point, Owen spoke again, quietly, almost reluctantly. "After I crossed over, I walked for hours before I realized something was wrong. Not the sky or the land, it was the people." His gaze lowered. "A couple passed me on the road. I didn't recognize them, but they looked at me like they knew me. Their expressions were confused, like they were trying to remember where we'd met." "What do you think that means?" I asked. "I don't know," he admitted. "Maybe in this timeline, the version of me they knew never walked that road. Maybe he lived a different life. Maybe he didn't vanish." He swallowed. "Maybe he still exists." A chill ran through me, not fear exactly, but the sense of standing at the edge of something too vast to understand. A world where the same person could exist twice, shaped by different years, different choices. "Did you ever try to find him?" I asked. Owen shook his head immediately. "No, I couldn't. If he's here, if he's living the life I should have lived, I don't have the right to interrupt that." His voice tightened. "If he's happy, I'd ruin it. And if he's not, I don't think I could handle knowing I was replaced." The honesty in that sentence lingered between us like a quiet confession. He stared down at his hands. "It's strange, Gary. I'm not afraid of being lost. I've been lost before. What terrifies me is the idea that time moved on without me, and did just fine." The wind shifted, brushing through the trees behind us. A few leaves drifted down, landing near our feet. I nudged one gently with my boot. "You're still here," I said. "That has to count for something." He didn't answer right away. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "Sometimes I wonder if this timeline took me in by mistake, like a door that opened at the wrong moment and closed before I could step back out." He leaned back, looking up at the sky, the same sky he'd called wrong, in small, subtle ways. "And what if it never opens again? What if this is where I end? In a year that didn't ask for me?" I felt the weight of his words settle heavily into my chest. I wanted to tell him he belonged somewhere, that no one was unwanted, that timelines didn't choose people. But the truth was simpler and harder. I didn't know, and pretending I did would have been cruel. So instead, I said the only thing that felt honest. "You're not alone here." Owen closed his eyes. The wind quieted, and for a moment, I thought maybe the forest was listening, trying to remember him too. We walked back toward the deeper woods slowly, letting the ridge fade behind us. Neither of us said much. Owen seemed caught somewhere between thought and memory, his steps softer than before, as if he didn't quite want to disturb the ground beneath him. I could feel something shifting in him, a quiet surrender, not to despair, but to truth. He wasn't searching only for a place anymore. He was searching for a sense of belonging, and the forest answered him with silence. As we pushed through a narrow corridor of fir trees, the afternoon light dimmed into an amber glow. Owen reached out and brushed his fingers along the trunk of one of the trees. "These weren't this thick," he murmured. "In my year they were younger, almost fragile." He paused. "Everything here feels ahead of me." I stepped closer. "Do you ever wonder why it happened? Why you, of all people?" A humorless breath left him, something almost like a laugh. "Every day. And every day the answer changes." He shook his head. "Sometimes I think it was a mistake. Sometimes I think it was a warning. Other times," his voice softened, "other times I think maybe I wasn't meant to stay in my own year." He didn't expand on that, and I didn't press. Some truths arrive before a person is ready to speak them. We followed the path until it split again, forming a Y shape between two dense clusters of trees. Owen stopped in the middle of the divide, breathing slowly, eyes scanning the ground. "This is familiar," he whispered. "Not the shape, but the feeling." "What feeling?" He closed his eyes. "Like the world is thinner here. Like if I walked far enough into that shadow, I'd find the place I slipped through." A faint shiver ran through me despite the warmth of the air. I looked at the shadows ahead. Ordinary darkness pooled beneath branches. Nothing unusual, nothing strange. And yet, Owen's certainty gave the place weight. He stepped toward the left path, but stopped before crossing into the shade. "In my year," he said, "I was coming home from a long hike. The sun was low like now. I walked past a clearing I'd seen dozens of times, but that day it looked sharper, defined, like it was waiting for me." His voice quivered. "I should have ignored it." "You didn't," I said gently. "No." He exhaled shakily. I stepped inside, and everything changed. He moved away from the fork, sitting on a fallen log nearby. "I keep replaying that moment," he said. "The step I took, the angle, the light. I think if I could just repeat it perfectly, I could slip back." I sat beside him. "And you've tried?" He nodded. "Almost every day. Every version. Different times of day. Different seasons. Different paths." He looked at the ground. "But I think that moment was specific. Too specific to recreate." The quiet stretched between us. "Gary," he said after a long pause, "do you believe time can make mistakes?" I hesitated. "I don't know. I think it can," he murmured. "I think sometimes the world folds imperfectly, like paper creased in the wrong direction." He rubbed his hands together slowly, and I slipped through one of those folds. Not because I was meant to, not because I was chosen, just because I was standing in the wrong place when the world flexed. He stared at his hands as if expecting them to vanish, or maybe reappear in another year altogether. "I keep telling myself I can fix it," he whispered, "but every day, it feels less possible." I felt something inside me tighten. "Then maybe the clearing isn't the answer," I said. "Maybe you're looking for something that can't be found the same way twice." He looked at me, eyes tired but still searching. "Then what am I supposed to do?" I didn't have an answer. I wished I did. A small gust of wind swept through the trees, stirring the branches overhead. Light flickered in thin, broken patterns across Owen's face. For a brief moment, he closed his eyes and tilted his head upward, like he was listening for something only he could hear. "Sometimes," he whispered, "I think the world I came from is fading, like it's slipping further away each time I try to remember it." He swallowed hard. "What if I forget it completely? What if it forgets me?" I felt the weight of that question settle deep in my chest. Not because I knew the answer, but because I knew what it felt like to fear losing the past. "You're here now," I said quietly. "And until something changes, I'm with you." Owen let out a breath he had been holding for too long. He didn't thank me. He didn't need to. The look in his eyes was enough. Even if he didn't say it, I could tell what he was thinking. He wasn't afraid of being lost. He was afraid that time itself had stopped looking for him. The next morning, Owen didn't meet me at the trailhead. It was the first time since we'd begun searching that he hadn't been there waiting, pacing lightly, scanning the woods as if the trees themselves might shift while he wasn't looking. The emptiness of the spot struck me harder than I expected. I waited a while, listening to the morning settle, insects waking, birds calling, the soft breeze brushing against the tall grass. But Owen didn't appear. I walked the trail alone at first, telling myself he was late or had taken another path. But the deeper I went into the forest, the more uneasy I felt. The quiet felt heavier without him beside me, as if the land remembered us walking together and didn't know what to do with only half the pair. It wasn't until I reached the meadow that I finally saw him. He was standing in the center of the clearing, perfectly still, staring down at the ground as if it held an answer he had begged for and feared receiving. His posture was rigid, tense, not the exhaustion of the past days, but something sharper. "Owen?" I called quietly. He didn't respond at first. When he finally looked up, his eyes were distant, almost glassy, as though whatever he had been thinking had carved a hollow space inside him. "I woke up this morning," he said, "and for a moment, I didn't remember my own year." The words hit me like cold water. He swallowed hard, forcing himself to continue. "I remembered pieces, faces, streets, the way certain winters felt, but the sequence was gone. I couldn't tell which memories came first. I didn't know if I was recalling my past or someone else's version of it." He shook his head, looking down again. The moment scared me more than crossing did. I stepped closer but didn't touch him. "Is it coming back now?" "Most of it," he said, "but it feels thinner, like I'm remembering through fog." He lifted his hands, palms up. "I used to carry my life inside me like something solid. Now it feels like sand slipping through my fingers." He crouched down, touching the soil the way he often did, gently, reverently. "I think the longer I stay here, the more this world settles around me, the more the edges of the life I came from blur." His voice tightened. "And I'm scared, Gary. I'm scared that one day I'll wake up and this will be the only year I remember." He closed his eyes, breathing shakily. "And if that happens, I won't have anything to go back to." I knelt beside him. "You're not losing yourself," I said softly, even though I wasn't entirely sure. "You're overwhelmed. Anyone would be." But he shook his head. "No, this is different." He lifted his gaze toward me. "Memory carries weight. It shapes time. And mine feels lighter every day, like something is pulling pieces of it away." He hesitated, like this timeline is trying to make room for me. Something about that idea made the clearing feel colder. "What if your memories aren't fading?" I asked quietly. "What if they're just adjusting?" He didn't answer. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It felt like the space between two truths we didn't want to face. After a moment, he rose to his feet and dusted off his hands. "There's something else," he said. "I had a dream last night. Or maybe it wasn't a dream." He rubbed his forehead. "I saw myself, another version of me, walking along a trail. But he wasn't here. He wasn't in this year. He looked older, or maybe younger. I don't know." He looked at me with a haunted expression. "I think I'm starting to overlap with versions of myself that don't exist here." A chill passed through me, thin and sharp. "What does that mean?" I asked quietly. He turned toward the trees, eyes following the gentle sway of branches. "It means this place is starting to rewrite where I'm supposed to be." His shoulders slumped, and I don't know how much time I have left before it finishes. I didn't know what frightened me more, losing Owen to another time, or watching him slowly fade into this one. The forest seemed to lean inward around us, listening. Before I could speak again, Owen whispered, "I'm starting to forget the sound of certain voices from my year." He paused, swallowing hard. "And I don't want to lose the people I loved twice." We stood in the clearing longer than I realized, the quiet settling around us until even the faintest sounds felt amplified. The rustle of leaves, the distant crack of a branch, the shifting of our own breathing. Owen kept his eyes on the tree line, not searching for the clearing he'd lost, but searching inward, the way someone does when trying to hold on to memories slipping out of reach. Finally, he broke the silence. "When I first crossed over," he said softly, "I didn't feel fear, not immediately. I felt disoriented, confused, but part of me thought it was temporary, a moment I could undo." He turned toward me, his expression weary. "Now I'm realizing that time isn't something you step out of lightly. It has weight, momentum, and the longer I stay here, the more I feel it pressing against me." We left the clearing behind, walking deeper into the forest. The air grew cooler, thick with the scent of damp earth. Owen walked more slowly today, as if each step carried the burden of recognizing something he could no longer name. At one point he stopped to lean against a tree, resting his forehead lightly against the bark. "There's a rhythm to the world," he murmured. "A pulse. In my year I could feel it without thinking, like a beat beneath everything. But here, It's off. Not wrong, just unfamiliar. Every sound, every shadow, every piece of air feels like it belongs to a song I haven't learned. His voice wavered, and I realized how deeply his dislocation ran, not just in place, but in the cadence of time itself. "Do you know what makes me feel the most lost?" he asked. "It's not that I'm in the wrong year. It's that I can't tell how far away mine is." We resumed walking, our footsteps soft against the forest floor. The trail narrowed, winding between cedar trunks that towered in columns of muted green. Owen brushed his fingers along the bark of one, leaving faint streaks where the moss shifted. "I keep trying to remember what I was doing right before I crossed," he said after a while. "I thought if I held on to that moment tightly enough, it would lead me back." He paused, searching for the memory. "But when I picture it now, the edges are blurred. The details don't feel like mine anymore. It's like trying to recall a dream days after waking." We reached a cluster of boulders shaped by wind and age. Owen climbed onto one of them, staring into the dense layers of forest ahead. "Sometimes I wonder," he said, "if the reason I can't find the clearing is because it didn't just move in space, it moved in meaning. Maybe it only existed at the exact moment I stepped through. Maybe time created it for a single breath, and once I crossed, it closed behind me like a seam." I climbed up beside him. From where we stood, the forest felt endless, a patchwork of shadows and shifting light. "What would you do?" I asked quietly. "If the clearing opened again? If you found it?" He hesitated longer than I expected. "I used to think I'd run to it," he finally said, without hesitation. "I'd step through and hope the world on the other side recognized me." His voice dropped to a murmur. "But now I'm not so sure." "Why not?" He swallowed. "Because I've changed, and I don't know if the person I was belongs there anymore." His honesty startled me, not because of the confession itself, but because of the calmness with which he said it. It wasn't despair, it was recognition. A soft gust of wind rippled through the clearing below us, rustling branches and sending scattered leaves across the forest floor. Owen watched the movement intently, as if searching for a rhythm he once knew. "I worry," he said, "that even if I stepped back into my year, I wouldn't fit, like returning to a home that remembers a different version of you." I let his words settle before responding. "Owen, your life didn't stop when you crossed. You kept thinking, feeling, changing. That doesn't make you wrong for your year. It just means you grew." He closed his eyes, letting the wind pass over him. "That's what scares me," he whispered, "that I'm growing in a direction my year never expected." We sat together on the boulder as the world softened into late afternoon light. Owen wasn't crying, but there was a heaviness in him that made me feel as if the forest were holding its breath again, waiting for him to find an answer it couldn't give. And as the shadows lengthened around us, it became clear that this search was no longer about finding a place to return to. It was about deciding whether returning was even possible. We left the boulder as the light shifted toward evening, the forest settling into a deeper shade of green. Owen walked a few steps ahead of me, his movements slower now, deliberate, as if each step required thought. He wasn't searching the way he had before, not scanning the tree line, not studying the ground for clues. Instead, he moved like someone trying to memorize the world around him, committing each detail to memory in case it changed without warning. At one point, he stopped near a narrow stream we'd crossed once before. The water slid quietly over smooth stones, catching faint streaks of fading sunlight. Owen knelt beside it and dipped his fingers into the current. "This is the same," he said softly. "Cold, clear, the smell of it, almost identical. Does that help?" I asked. He looked into the water, expression unreadable. "A little. Mostly it hurts." "Why?" "Because it reminds me what it feels like to belong somewhere." His reflection rippled with the movement of the stream, and how easily that feeling disappears. He cupped some water in his hands, watching it drip between his fingers. "The stream in my year had a bend just ahead," he said, pointing upstream. "A fallen tree rested across it. Kids used to balance on it in summer. But when we looked last week, it wasn't there." He let out a breath. "It won't fall for another decade." The weight of that statement lingered between us. We continued on, following the stream until it curved out of sight. The forest around us grew denser, shadows stretching into long shapes that clung to the underbrush. Owen kept glancing at the way the shadows moved, as if he expected them to settle into a pattern he recognized. "There's something strange about this hour," he said suddenly, right before dusk. The air feels thinner. Thinner? Like I'm walking along the edge of something I can't see. He pressed a hand to his chest. Like if I stepped in the wrong direction, I'd slip again. Maybe not back to my ear. Maybe somewhere else entirely. The thought chilled me. And is that what you want? I asked carefully. To slip again? He hesitated. Too long for comfort. I want to go home, he finally said. But sometimes I think the only way home is through something unpredictable. And I don't know if I'm willing to trust a mistake twice. We walked until the trail narrowed into a corridor of tall, straight pines. The air was still here, trapped between the thick trunks, carrying no breeze, no birdsong, no sign of the outside world. Owen slowed, his steps soundless on the soft ground. This place, he whispered. It feels close. I stopped beside him. The air did feel different, heavier, like a room that had just gone quiet after someone left. The forest didn't move. Even our breathing sounded too loud. Owen closed his eyes. There's pressure here, he murmured. Like before, a tightness, the kind that pushes against your skin. He lifted his hand slightly as if sensing something in the air. But it's faint, like the world is remembering something it hasn't done yet. We waited, listening. At first nothing happened. Then, a soft vibration, so subtle I couldn't tell if it came from the ground or from somewhere inside my own chest, passed through the space around us. It wasn't sound, it wasn't movement. It was more like a shift in the way the forest breathed. Owen opened his eyes, wide and startled. Did you feel that? I'm not sure. It was the same, he whispered. Not as strong, but similar. Like the moment before a fold. Like time tightening. He stepped forward instinctively as though drawn. Owen, I said, my voice low. Be careful. He froze. Not because of my warning, but because whatever he sensed had vanished again, completely, abruptly, without trace. The air returned to its heavy stillness. The vibration dissolved. The forest exhaled, and Owen's hope collapsed with it. It's gone, he said. His voice cracked, barely audible. For a second, it felt like everything aligned, like the world was trying to show me the thread I lost. He ran a hand through his hair, pacing in a tight, broken circle. Why does it keep showing me pieces? Why does it keep letting me get close? I stepped toward him. Owen. He held up a hand, not to push me away, but to steady himself. His expression was raw. Fear, desperation, grief layered until they were indistinguishable. I can't do this much longer, he whispered. Every time I feel that shift, I think it's the moment. The moment I can undo everything. And every time it fades, I feel like I'm losing the world I came from a little more. His voice dropped further. What if I'm meant to lose it? What if that's the price of being here? I wanted to tell him that wasn't true, that no one was meant to disappear from their own life, but the woods around us felt too ancient, too indifferent for easy reassurances. Instead, I placed a hand on his arm. We'll figure this out. You're not alone. He nodded slowly, but his eyes drifted back toward the empty space where he'd felt the shift, like a man staring at the doorway of a home he could no longer reach. And as the last of the daylight faded, I realized something quietly devastating. Owen wasn't searching for the clearing anymore. He was searching for a version of himself that time had started to erase. Owen didn't come by the next morning. I waited at the trailhead longer than usual, watching the sunlight crawl slowly across the gravel, listening for footsteps that never arrived. A knot of worry tightened in my chest. Not the quiet concern I'd felt before, but something sharper, more urgent. He had never missed meeting me 2 days in a row. I finally started down the trail alone, hoping to find him somewhere along the way. The forest felt different today. Not hostile, not welcoming, simply indifferent. Like it had grown tired of carrying secrets it wasn't meant to explain. My footsteps sounded louder than usual. Even the birds seemed hesitant to break the hush hanging over the trees. It wasn't until I reached the meadow, the place that had been almost right in Owen's memory, that I saw him. He was sitting in the grass, knees drawn up, arms wrapped loosely around them. From a distance he looked peaceful, but the moment I got closer I saw that his face was pale, drained, his eyes fixed on a point far beyond the horizon. Owen, I said softly. You all right? He didn't answer immediately. His gaze drifted toward me, then back to the ground, as if he had to remind himself I existed in this moment, in this year. I woke up today. he said quietly. And for the first time, I couldn't remember what season it was when I crossed. I knelt beside him. It was summer, wasn't it? You told me that. Was it? He asked. He rubbed a hand across his forehead. I can't feel it anymore. The warmth of it, the way the air smelled. I try to remember the sky from that day, and all I see is blank space. He wasn't exaggerating. Something in his voice told me the memory wasn't just fading, it was dissolving. I'm losing the anchors, he said. All the markers that told me who I was, where I was, when I belonged. He dug his fingers into the soil. And it's getting easier. That's the part that scares me. It shouldn't be easy to forget your life. He took a shaky breath. Last night, he continued, I heard a woman's voice. I don't know who she was. I don't know if she was from my year or this one. I don't even know if she was real. He looked up at me. Gary, I think I'm unraveling. The honesty of it struck me harder than anything he'd said before. I sat beside him in the grass. You're not unraveling, I said gently. You're exhausted. You've been holding this alone for too long. But Owen shook his head. No, it's more than that. I think this timeline is settling around me, like new roots growing over old ones. His voice thinned. And if I stay here much longer, I won't remember which roots were mine to begin with. We sat in silence for a long moment, the meadow still and warm around us. When he finally stood, his balance wavered slightly, as if the ground were shifting beneath him. Not physically, but temporally. I need to try something, he said. What? He pointed deeper into the woods. There's a ridge not far from here, the angle of the slope. I felt something there last week. I didn't tell you because I wasn't sure. He swallowed. But if there's any place where a fold could open again, it's there. I hesitated. And what if you're wrong? What if nothing happens? He gave a small, tired smile. Then nothing happens. But doing nothing is worse. So we followed the narrow trail toward the ridge. Owen walked with a strange determination. Not frantic, not hopeful, but resolved. Like someone moving toward a door they don't believe will open but must knock on anyway. When we reached the ridge, the world around us seemed to quiet in a way I didn't understand. The trees stood tall and unmoving. The air thickened with an almost expectant calm. Owen stepped forward, his breath shallow. This is it, he whispered. If there's still a thread connecting me to my year, I'd feel it here. He closed his eyes, and for a moment the world seemed to hold still, not in silence, but in anticipation, like time itself had paused to listen. Owen kept his eyes closed as he stepped deeper onto the ridge, his breathing slow and deliberate. I stayed just behind him, afraid to interrupt whatever fragile connection he hoped to find. The forest around us felt unnaturally still, as if something held it in suspension. Even the wind seemed hesitant to move. He raised a hand slightly, as if feeling the air for a change in pressure. There, he whispered. It's faint, but something's here. I didn't feel anything, not at first, but as I focused on the space around us, I sensed a subtle shift, something like walking into a room where the temperature drops only a degree or two, barely noticeable, except for the way your skin recognizes it before your mind does. Owen opened his eyes slowly. When I crossed the first time, the world felt tight, like everything was being pulled inward, but I couldn't see the pressure, only feel it. His gaze drifted along the ridge, following the subtle curve of the land. Right now, it's almost the same. He stepped forward again, testing the ground with the caution of someone approaching a memory made physical. If it's going to happen anywhere, it's here. My heart tightened. Owen, I said softly, if something happens, do you think you'll know where you're going? He didn't look back. I don't know, he said, but I know where I can't stay. He crouched down, pressing his palm against the soil. I watched the steady rise and fall of his shoulders, the way his fingers curled slightly as if gripping the earth to steady himself. Owen, I said again, tell me what you feel. At the edges, he murmured, the world feels thin, like the seam between fabric layers. His voice trembled. If I push too hard, I could slip. But if I don't push at all, I'll never know if the path is still there. He closed his eyes again, focusing. The seconds stretched. Then something changed. I felt it, not through sight or sound, but through the way the air tightened, the way my breath felt heavier in my chest. A soft vibration, not physical, but perceptible, moved through the space around us, almost like the low hum of electricity. Owen's eyes flew open. "Do you feel that?" "I think so." His face shifted, hope, fear, disbelief, all tangled together. "This is what it felt like," he whispered. Right before everything shifted, the vibration deepened, still faint, still subtle, but undeniably real. The air around us seemed to pull inward, as though the forest itself were inhaling. Owen stepped backward, startled by the intensity. "It's stronger. It's actually stronger." Then his expression changed again, flickering with something like recognition. No, wait, this isn't right." "What do you mean?" He shook his head tightly. "It's not the same pattern. The first time, the fold opened in a moment of absolute stillness. Everything matched. The world was synchronized. His breathing quickened. But this is unstable. It's unfinished. It's..." A soft cracking sound echoed through the ridge. Tiny, like ice shifting beneath snow. The vibration collapsed instantly, disappearing as if someone had snapped a thread. The air returned to normal. The forest exhaled, and Owen staggered backward, knees nearly buckling. I caught him by the arm. "Owen!" He pulled away, pressing a hand against his forehead. "It almost opened," he whispered. "It was close. Too close." His voice cracked. "If I'd stepped forward, I don't know where I would have gone." I swallowed hard. "But not home." He shook his head. "No, not home." He sank to the ground, fingers digging into the dirt. "Gary, something's wrong. The fold isn't aligned with my year anymore." He stared at the ridge with a hollow expression. "It's drifting." "What does that mean?" "It means I'm not just far from my year." His voice trembled. "I'm losing the path to it entirely." The weight of those words settled heavily in my chest. He covered his face with both hands. "I kept thinking I could find my way back if I just walked the same steps. But this world isn't lining up with the moment I came from. The longer I'm here, the more this place solidifies, and the more the memory of my year distorts." He lowered his hands slowly. "If I cross again now, I could slip into anything, any version of the world. I might never find the right one." The sun dipped lower, shadows stretching across the ridge. Owen looked at me, exhausted and terrified. "I'm stuck between years," he whispered, "and the world is closing around me." I knelt beside him, wishing I had something to offer. An answer, a reassurance, a map out of the impossible. But the truth sat heavy between us. He wasn't losing the path back. The path was losing him. We stayed on the ridge until the light began to fade. Neither of us ready to move. Both of us unsure what movement would even mean anymore. Owen sat with his back against a tree, hands clasped loosely in his lap. He wasn't crying. He looked past that point, drained in a way that went deeper than exhaustion. The forest around us seemed to sense it. The evening air softened, the wind holding itself still, letting the quiet settle over him like a fragile blanket. "I thought I had more time," he murmured at last. His voice was thin, barely more than breath. I thought the world would give me a chance to find my way back before it started closing the door." "You're not out of time," I said gently. He looked at me with a hollow expression that said he didn't believe that. "Not fully, maybe not at all." "I can feel it," he said, pressing a hand lightly over his chest. "The longer I stay here, the more this year forms itself around me. It's like the version of the world I belonged to is fading, and this one is learning my shape." The phrasing unsettled me. "Learning your shape?" He nodded. "Time doesn't like loose threads, Gary. It tries to weave them into something." His fingers tightened around the fabric of his jeans. "And I'm becoming woven into a story that wasn't supposed to include me." We sat in silence for a while, listening to the forest settle into dusk. The ridge darkened, shadows stretching long and thin. Owen stared ahead, absorbing the quiet, almost as though he were measuring it, comparing it to memories that no longer aligned. "Do you think," he asked quietly, "that I'll disappear from my year, like I was never there?" The question caught in my chest. "I don't think you can be erased," I said softly, "but I'm already forgetting pieces." He replied, "And if I forget them, do they forget me back?" His voice trembled. "I can't decide what's worse, that I might never return, or that the world I'm trying to return to won't remember where I fit." He lowered his gaze. Every day, the details change. Small ones, but important. My mother's kitchen window. Was it to the left or the right of the door? My best friend's laugh. Was it sharp or soft? The building where I worked. Did it have 2 floors or 3? He dragged in a shaking breath. I used to know those things. I lived those things. And now I have to think. I felt something tighten painfully in my chest. He wasn't describing simple forgetfulness. He was describing erosion. Slow, inevitable, irreversible. Owen, I said, memory isn't constant. Things fade, but they come back. Maybe you just need... No, he whispered. This isn't fading. It's rewriting. The word hung in the air, heavy. He pushed himself to his feet, unsteady but determined, and stepped toward the edge of the ridge. The valley below glowed with the last traces of evening light, a soft gradient of gold and blue. Owen stared at it as though trying to memorize the world one last time. I used to feel like I could reach the moment I came from, he said. Even if I couldn't see it, I felt it, like walking toward a memory. He swallowed hard, but now it feels distant, like it belongs to someone else. He ran a hand through his hair, shoulders trembling. I don't know how to keep holding on to a life the world is trying to take away from me. I stepped beside him. You're not losing everything, I insisted. You're still here. You still know who you are. He hesitated, then asked the quietest, most heartbreaking question he'd asked yet. For how long? Night crept in slowly, the forest darkening inch by inch. Owen let his hands fall to his sides, staring into the valley with an expression of quiet resignation. I'm tired, Gary, he said. Tired in a way I didn't know a person could be. It's not just the searching. It's the not knowing what stays when everything else changes. He turned toward me, and in that moment I saw it. The acceptance he had fought for weeks, finally settling across his features. If the world chooses a place for me, he whispered, maybe I just have to let it. A shiver ran through me. Owen, what are you saying? He looked past me, into the darkening line of trees. I think the clearing stopped calling to me because it doesn't want me anymore. He stepped away from the ridge, the fading light catching the exhaustion in his eyes. And maybe, he said quietly, this year does. The night swallowed the last of the daylight, and in the dimness, I felt the shift, not in the forest, not in the ground, but in Owen himself. He wasn't looking for a way back anymore. He was preparing for the possibility that he had nowhere left to go. I think about that last night on the ridge more often than I should. There was nothing dramatic about it. No flash of light, no trembling in the ground, no sudden fold in the air that signaled the world was about to shift. Owen didn't run or vanish or step into anything unseen. He simply stood there, looking at a landscape that didn't belong to him, and I watched something quiet settle behind his eyes. Acceptance, maybe, or surrender. I couldn't tell the difference then, and I'm not sure I can now. We walked back together in near silence. I tried not to think about how his footsteps sounded lighter, as if even gravity wasn't sure what to do with him anymore. When we reached the edge of town, he thanked me for listening, for searching, for not calling him crazy. He said it gently, almost like an apology, and then he walked away without saying where he was going. That was the last time I saw him. Some nights, when the wind moves through the trees in that strange, uneven way, I wonder if he slipped into another fold, one he didn't recognize until he was already through. Other nights, I think maybe he stayed in this year, wandering the quiet spaces between towns, letting the world rewrite a home for him piece by piece. But most of the time, I think he simply disappeared into whatever place hurt the least. I still walk the trails where we searched. I still look for the clearing he described, even though I know I wouldn't recognize it the way he did. And each time I return to the ridge, I stand where he stood and feel the air around me settle into stillness. He needed help to get back to his year, but sometimes I think the truth is simpler, heavier, and lonelier. I don't think time ever let him go home.